So I am going to be talking with you all about philanthropy for the next 8.5 minutes. The title of my talk may seem a little harsh when giving back just isn't enough. The title was going to be Philanthropy, Sometimes Love Just Ain't Enough, like that early 90s, late 80s song, but I figured some of you might be too young to remember it, so, so I didn't use that. I want to talk about philanthropy and why it's so important for all of us to be intentional and strategic and make sure that our investments are very effective. Because I know many of you here are in the business community and you're used to doing things effectively and intentionally, but it seems like when folks get into philanthropy, it's like, I just want to give back. I just want to help. And I just love this cause. And there's not a lot of data and analytics and a lot of detail and thought and intentionality put behind it. Many philanthropists are doing it right, don't get me wrong. But I just really want to impart the importance of the philanthropic sector on everybody today and why we just have opportunities to tighten it up a little bit. So the sector itself, it's huge. It employs millions of people. It's a $900 billion industry. And it's been growing, and that growth trend is from 2008 to 13, but since 13 it's also continued to grow. So it's really outpaced business in some ways in terms of its growth and the expansion nationwide of the philanthropic sector as a whole. And so that is obviously a reason we should all be concerned that it succeeds and that it's done, correctly. And the second element is that sector is these boxes. So we have a world where some folks are born in a lucky lottery and they have, a lot of resources and supports and things to get them to be high achievers. And then there are some that just didn't win that lottery and have a lot more obstacles to overcome. So these boxes really represent the combination, really, if you will, of government and philanthropy. Those are the ways that we can get the playing field leveled for those that didn't have an equal footing starting out. And so because that is sort of those boxes, if you will, are a combination of government and philanthropy, yet public doesn't. It's very interesting. The public really feels that philanthropy does a better job at solving social issues, social problems. So it's a really important sector where folks are really trying to make these social changes. And if we understand that they're not really trusting government to do it, they're really looking at the philanthropic sector, it's even more important that we get it right because you have all of this pressure and attention focused there. And the next issue I wanted to show is those boxes again, those equity boxes, those stepping stones, if you will, that really help level the playing field. They're super important because when you look at our playing field and you look at this chart here, for instance, shows the cohorts of just the American public, where if you're born by income, the lower 20 percentile, the next 20 by 20%, right? So when you are, say, I don't know if this blinker works now, it doesn't. If you are, say, born, in 1980 in the bottom 20% income, right? You have skipped the slide. You have about a 11% chance of making it into that upper 20th quartile, so, or quintile, sorry. Not the 20% are quintiles, the 25% are quartiles. So the fact is that this chart just shows that you need different supports to get you there from the bottom to the top if you hope to make that leap over time, right? And that's something that's super important to my life because I was one of those people that made it from the bottom 20% quintile, if you will, to the top 20% quintile in America. And it was not by, myself alone, it was by a lot of different boxes, some, crates, maybe a few cinder blocks, I don't know, lots of different things need to help a person along that trajectory. So that's why I'm so passionate about philanthropy and making sure that we get it right because it's so necessary and it's oftentimes the only way that someone can make it from the lottery they were born into to be successful in this country. So the thing I want to sort of impart on everybody today, just two small points really, about how to make your philanthropy and philanthropic giving most effective is that this way is not necessarily the way to do it. So there was, for a long time, whenever people would talk about philanthropy, they would talk about the overhead. They would gauge the nonprofits that they were going to invest in by saying, 95 cents on every dollar goes just to programming? That's awesome. But in reality, that's just not an effective way to gauge the effectiveness of these organizations. Because many of you, with your corporations, how many of you have 5% overhead in your company? How many of your companies run with 5% overhead? Yeah, so why would we expect them to? Because you just really can't run a whole operation and have IT and accounting and communications and all of the things that you need to be a successful social service sector company, which is effectively what nonprofits are. The title is a little misleading, but they're corporations, they're nonprofit corporations. So a lot of the folks, so the BBB, the GuideStar, and Charity Navigator, they came together back in 2013 to let everybody know that, dear donors of America, using the overhead percentage to decide if you find a nonprofit to be effective is just not the way to do it. So it's really exciting that they've been able to sort of start this windfall. And now since 2013, there's been a lot of agreement, and now donors are not so much only looking at overhead. But then you see this philanthropic landscape report that just was released. I don't know if anyone went to the event yesterday in Anaheim about the release of this report. Still 76% of people are saying that they're looking at overhead percentages when they decide if a nonprofit is worth giving to. So clearly, with 3/4 of people still looking at this indicator that's essentially meaningless is just not really the way that we want to go. So I wanted to start off with what's not the way to measure effectiveness, and now we'll move into how do we look and see if something is truly working. And so this is why one of my favorite quotes by an economist, because I'm a geek, what you measure affects what you do, and if you don't measure the right things, you will not do the right things. And this holds particularly true for philanthropy when there's so many different things you could do. If you care about animals, you could fund an animal shelter, you could do a public relations campaign about animal rights. There's just so many different avenues to go toward. So it's really important that people think about what is the actual thing that they want to change, and then work only toward that, and then measure only toward that. Because if you don't, you can go in 50,000 different directions. And so that is why when we work with folks, we work with them to think, okay, what is it that you want to do? What do you want your investment to do? And this is something that has really finally started to be more commonplace, if you will, over the years, this accountability frameworks, and really getting people to think carefully, when you're making this investment in social benefit, what do you want it to do for you, for the community, for a certain community? What's the end goal? So, telling people to make their investments smart. That's really the one thing that we want people to get out of today. Just when you're giving philanthropically, just be smart about it. Make sure what you're doing is very particular. You want to help animals? Which animals? Where are the animals? What kind of animals? How old are the animals? Measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. Because you don't just want to be doing something in perpetuity. The most successful philanthropists are really setting time-limited goals. Like Harlem's Children's Zone, we will get that up and running in X number of years. That was very successful. Other founders are really like, okay, by 2026, I am going to reduce XY disease by 1%. So whatever it is, but if you don't set a goal, just like in business, you will never know if you achieved it. So really pushing people toward being smart about their investments. And then the second thing that successful philanthropists are doing is thinking big. Or bigly. They're really moving away from the charity mindset. The charity mindset, just an example, is, okay, there's a homeless man. I'm going to give him a coat because he is homeless and cold and he needs this coat today. That's fine. That's helping him right now. That's great. Then you move into sort of philanthropy 1.0, which is, homeless man, maybe we should set up a center for homeless people, do wraparound services where they can get nutrition and work skills and XYZ supports. And then sort of the systems change. The philanthropy 2.0 is, okay, why are there 50 homeless guys in this park? What made them homeless? Why are they here? What is the root cause that brought them here? And then how do we work to change it? So it's taking sort of bigger risks. So those of you that are risk averse, may want to begin on this end of the spectrum. But eventually, the biggest return on your investment comes when you make those systemic changes that really look at the root cause of why the issue is the way that it is. So that means moving to think of services for people into systems that will better support them. So at the end of the day, if we learn nothing else today, it's that you want your philanthropy to be very smart, and you want to really think of the systems that things are happening within rather than just particular services, because that's where you get the most bang for your buck, and that's where you make the greatest impact. And there are a lot of people out there relying on the philanthropic giving of folks like yourselves and the groups that you work with. So That was the 9 minutes. Thank you.
So what you just saw there with some glitches was 2 babies in grocery bags handed through a wooden hatch on the side of a man's home that I'm about to tell you about, received by him, umbilical cords still attached. And I want to tell you today about the story of coming across this man and how he's kind of changed my life. In June of 2011, I was getting breakfast with my college roommate. We were sitting down at an establishment that had newspapers on the table, and the LA Times was right smack dab in the middle. And on the front page, near the bottom of the newspaper, was an article titled, "South Korean Pastor Tends Unwanted Flock." We were grabbed by the headline, read further, and it was all about this man, Pastor Lee Jong-rak in Seoul, who had installed this, what appeared to us to be a mailbox for abandoned babies. We were incredibly moved by this story, had so many questions of why is this happening, why is this man doing this, all of these things that would naturally come to mind. And we reached out to the reporter because we thought, we have to tell this story. It's here today, it'll be gone tomorrow, but we don't want people to forget. And so we reached out to the reporter. He got back to us with the contact information for this home-turned-orphanage out in South Korea. We reached out to him about an hour later. We got a response with an email address. It was a Hanmail address. And we wrote this email to an unknown recipient and asked if we could come film a documentary about their lives and the work that they were doing. After repeated attempts, there was no success, and about a month later, we felt like giving up until we received an email out of the blue from Pastor Lee himself. It was a Google translated email, and it basically said, "I don't know what it means to make a documentary film, but you can come live with me for a while if you'd like." So we wrote back, "See you soon," and we took that as our invitation to fly across the country and meet this man and tell his story. Heading back to campus that fall, we were quickly confronted with a number of obstacles. We didn't have any money, we didn't have any film experience really, and we didn't have any team to make this movie. And so we began assembling a group of other college students at the University of Southern California, where I went to college, and gathered the team. We put a Kickstarter video up to raise some funds. We had a $20,000 goal, and we reached that number at the 11th hour, basically $10 at a time. We were able to receive 2 private donations that matched that amount, in addition to getting connected with the owner of Red Camera, which is the top-of-the-line digital camera, and they donated over $100,000 of camera equipment for us to go make this film. We then booked our flights, and we headed off to South Korea over our Christmas and New Year's during our winter break, and we spent that time with their family, living at this home-turned orphanage and watching babies come through this box night after night. And what had initially been planned for a 10-minute short film quickly became a 90-minute feature-length documentary. We came back really fired up. We were editing the footage in our dorm room, blowing the power multiple times because of the equipment running 24/7. And we applied to all these film festivals. We had this ambition to be accepted into Sundance and become famous off of this story, which is clearly a selfish ambition. And thankfully, we were turned down. And our backup festival turned us down. And our backup festival turned us down. In fact, really the only festival that showed any interest was this really niche film festival in San Antonio, Texas, called the San Antonio Independent Christian Film Festival. We went begrudgingly, only because you had to be present to receive an award, and we wanted an award on our DVD case. Unbeknownst to us, when we won the grand prize, it came with the largest grant involved in a film festival winning in the country, $100,000. We used that money to take 2 other film trips to refine the documentary, update the story. Came back, we edited a trailer that we posted on our Facebook page that was designed really to just keep friends and family updated about the story. It ended up going viral. We had 8 million views in just under 48 hours. We had a Gmail account linked to our Facebook that was flooded with over 5,000 emails of people wanting to get involved, wanting to donate. And so we started a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, to basically act as a funnel for U.S. interest to support financially the man that was doing this work in South Korea. Because of all the attention, we're connected with a distributor, small company again called Pine Creek Entertainment. They were able to get us in 900 theaters across the US and Canada for a 3-night only release. Over the course of those 3 nights, almost 300,000 people came to see the film, generating close to $4 million in ticket sales, all of which were directed to this pastor and the ministry he had in South Korea. We also received over $1 million in private donations during that same window, and were able to support him in a number of amazing ways, one of which was moving his family of 19 adopted children into a larger facility where they could have permanent medical attention and help. A lot of them were severely disabled or deformed and required serious medical attention. And then we converted his existing home where the box was located into a maternity shelter, where women in these crisis situations could come and receive counseling, temporary shelter, physical resources that were given out on a monthly basis, adoption information, etc., and work towards Pastor Lee's goal of changing the world and changing a culture of life in his country and across the world. As I thought about this topic and vision to finding that Kevin had kind of given me, I think, if anything, what I wanted to share this story was to prove to you that there is really no vision too large, no obstacle too significant, and no person too inadequate to accomplish things and to really do good for the world. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
I want to tell you about Better Angels. Better Angels is an organization that was formed after 2016 elections. And really the whole goal of the organization is to recognize the challenges we have with polarization. We have the left and the right going absolutely at each other's throats right now. And if you saw the Mueller coverage today, and if you saw AOC before that, and you saw immigration before that, and you saw Kavanaugh before that, you know where we're at. You've probably seen it in your workplace, you've probably seen it at home, you've seen it with your friends. The country is absolutely polarized and divided, and Better Angels is all about depolarizing our country. So how do we do that? What does polarization do? It creates anger, pain, and divisiveness. And the divisiveness can actually happen in your own family, right? And some people are afraid to talk politics anymore. I remember being at a workshop that I'll talk about in a second, and a lady afterwards said, this was an amazing, amazing healing workshop to get the reds and the blues talking together. And she said, but how could you vote for him? How could you possibly vote for him? And her face was so pained, right? And it was like such an emotional, visceral reaction she was having, triggering something. It was real for her, it wasn't real for me, but it was interesting to watch. The polarization keeps us from focusing on the real issues of the country. The nation's work is not getting done, and a lot of people are super frustrated about that. What are the issues? Illegal immigration, healthcare infrastructure, abortion, gun rights, federal debt, climate change, income inequality, welfare reform, social security. It just goes on and on and on. The work's not getting done, and what are we doing? We're rehashing the same stuff over and over and over. It's a zero-sum game, right? I win, you lose. You lose, I win. That's what polarization creates. The country is crying out for moderation. The center is being driven by the fringes on both sides, as opposed to, the fringes are being driven, yeah, that's right. The center is being driven by the fringes as opposed to the center driving the fringes. Each side thinks the other has lost its mind, and that's a fact. If you talk to people, they are just like that woman, how could you vote for him? Forget about style versus substance, forget about policy versus positioning or publicity. They are absolutely believe the other side is just like lost their mind. I actually have felt that way many times myself watching CNN and MSNBC. And buckle up, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, right? We're already seeing this with the Democrats are going after each other, the Republicans are watching, Trump's going after the squad so he can kind of create some political gamesmanship there. It's working on some level, hurting others on another level. And no matter what happens between now and the end of the year and the election, going into 2020, whoever wins, the other side is going to lose their mind still. So we are not only going to be fired up, we're going to have to do a lot of healing leading up to it, and of course, post-2020. Whoops, sorry, wrong one. The mission. Our mission at Better Angels is to unify your local community, the states, and our country. Build working alliances that are going to help bring us back together and focus on policy changes, understanding. We are all about listen and learn as opposed to declare and debate. It's a win-win as opposed to a zero-sum game. And how do we do that? We do that by looking at the dignity of somebody else, their personal experiences, their perspectives, what they've gone through in their lives, and why do they choose the side they choose. It's not about making them come to our side. It's like, how can I find out what drives you, what's important to you, and where are the areas of commonality that we can come to, that we've actually done for hundreds of years in this country. Our name comes from Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address. He actually spoke to this, if you remember, Civil War time, right? We were just at the North and the South, were about ready to totally go to blows, and they did. But he said, we must not break our bonds of affection. We must remember the mystic chords of memory to be touched by the better angels of our human nature. It is actually, from a spiritual perspective, unconditional love is our natural condition, right? And then when we start getting to a place, you're really supposed to come from the heart as opposed to come from ego. And how do we get back to that? Let's not forget that. Get your picture? Cool. All right. So how do we do this? We do this in workshops. It's kind of our flagship product. It's a day-long workshop where we get 7 reds, Republicans, 7 blues together, and we go through a series of exercises that are basically marriage, family counseling type dynamics. And it works. It really works. It's about providing a safe sanctuary where you're not going to get demonized or vilified for your goals or your perspectives or your views or your politics. We have trained moderators that use proven exercises, and when it's all said and done, there's some really great magic that happens when you go through a workshop. Again, listen and learn as opposed to declare and debate. Come in there with a sense of curiosity, awe, understanding, wonder. Why are you like that? And then you find out why they are. And then you realize they're not that different from you. They kind of look like this. These are one I did in Albuquerque. That's one I did in one of my moderators. So we've got reds and blues all in a circle. So we do a stereotype exercise. So we ask the blues, this is pretty cool. Hey blues, what do you think the reds think of you? Okay, well, we're frustrated because they think that we're socialists. They think that we are snowflakes, that we are big government, that we are Antifa lovers, that we are baby killers, right? That's what, we write all this down. And it's really kind of radical honesty. And then we ask them, is there a nugget of truth to any of that? And invariably, there's a little bit of truth to all of it, right? And then we ask the Reds, hey Reds, Republicans, what do you think of the Democrats? What do you think the Democrats think of you? They say, we're cold and incompassionate. We are gun lovers. We are anti-immigrant. We are Jesus freaks, Bible thumpers. That's what the Reds think the blues think of them. And they're intolerant. Is it true? Probably not in the full spectrum, but maybe just teeny little bit it is. And then we do what's called a fishbowl exercise, which is what some of those pictures were. And you can see this is a fishbowl exercise right here. We asked the Reds to sit on the outside, and we had the blues sit in a circle inside of a classroom environment. And we asked the blues, so why is your why is your party best to lead the country? And they speak for 20 minutes. And the Reds have to sit there and listen. And that's what she's doing right there. Right? She's like, what? And they got to take it. But then they switch. And the Reds get to go on the inside, and the blues have to be on the outside and listen. Why is your party and your politics better to lead the country? And they start to, okay, just, Interesting? And then we get together in the afternoon, and there's a lot of clarification. What did you mean when you said this? What did you mean when you said that? What do you mean when you said this? What do you mean when you said that? And what they find, and again, this is all with a very strict structure. We are not here to debate and change your mind. We're here to understand, is there any common ground? And you know what? 90% of the time, there's common ground. Little selfie shot there at me. I'm actually the state coordinator in New Mexico because I go back and forth between here and Newport and New Mexico all the time. And I've got moderators in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and other parts of the state, and we do these workshops on a regular basis. That's what people say. We talked to people this weekend. I was very, very impressed by the dynamics of that. If you did 20,000 of these across the nation, you would change the world. I truly believe that. That's what Red said. We're in all 50 states. We've done over 140 different workshops so far. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of people who express a lot of interest in this type of work, and it's growing dramatically. It smashes a lot of the stereotypes of what one group or another group is supposed to be. The Democrat, she said, I can listen to opinions that I don't agree with without the anger, annoyance, or frustration shooting up my spine. Yeah. Which kind of leads us to this. Another part of what we talk about is depolarizing yourself within, because that's even bigger. It's the first step before the workshops. That emotional regulation. So when you're watching CNN and you're like, are you effing kidding me? Right? If you're blue and you're watching Fox, you're watching Hannity or Tucker Carlson, and they're going through what they go through, and you're getting all fired up, what is that? What's that emotional regulation? So can you control yourself internally, practice a little bit of mindfulness and breathing as you're starting to get yourself worked up? Can you depolarize yourself within? So I don't know if anybody knows Byron Katie. Byron Katie does the work. And this is kind of a form of NLP, kind of mess with your subconscious. But if somebody's giving you a hard time, or you're getting all fired up and you're in anger, rage, you're polarized, he's a racist. Let's play with that for a second. Question you can ask, and Byron Katie does this, and this is how you can emotionally deregulate. Is it true? Yes, it's true. He's a fucking racist. Can you know 100% that it's true? No. And what the reason you ask, is it 100% true? We're trying to say there's no absolutes, right? Who are you with that story that he's a racist? I'm fired up. I'm going to get those guys. I'm going to impeach him. That's who I am. I'm angry. Okay, well, who are you without that story? I'm chill. I'm cool. I'm calm. I'm a citizen. I'm dedicated to, working together and being at peace. And then she does something called a turnaround. Turnaround says, he's a racist. He's not a racist. I'm the racist. They're the racist. So just ways to kind of emotionally deregulate yourself and to control your emotions when you're fired up. And then we can start looking at this from a healing, from a collaborative approach, with our politics. So this is interesting. I don't know if you've caught this or not, but there's hope. AOC and Ted Cruz are talking to each other right now about a very important piece of legislation, banning Congress, members of Congress, lifetime ban from ever being a lobbyist. She threw it out there. He responded on Twitter. They're like, hey, I'm down to talk. I'm down to talk. Are you guys down to talk? And the staffs are talking to each other. So there is hope. We can get reds and blues to tackle important legislation. Ask me offline what she taught me. And the takeaways real quick. 90% of the time we are in alignment. Each side backs up their positions with data, so there's a lot of biased data out there. Everybody hates the media. That's what we learned from our workshops. There's a huge disdain for the media on both sides. Depolarizing within, first and foremost. Control your emotions, understand what's triggering you, and you might find the fact that there's more to the story. And there are no absolutes. Question everything. There's degrees of being red. There's degrees of being blue. There is a whole lot of shades of gray here for our politics. Find them. And remember, there is no us versus them. There's only all of us. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. How to build relationships without focusing on relationships. So here's the challenge. Most of us are in some form of leadership. We either are entrepreneurs, we're working for an organization, or we lead a family. And in any of those cases, where our challenge is always how do we improve our performance? How do we improve execution? How do we get people that are on our teams to produce what we want to accomplish without us always having to get involved, problem solve it, deal with it, all of that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? And a lot of times we think it's a breakdown of relationships. Like, oh, the communication isn't working, people aren't listening, maybe I'm not saying it right, I've got this vision, I tell people, everybody's excited, but then nothing happens. So I'd like to break this down with an actual model that I use to diagnose organizations when I go into to really get some fast results. And to me, this is just such a slick way of looking at a situation and understanding root cause. So basically, it starts with leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in your charge. So then the question is, how do we do that? And if I look at it, at the very top is the ends. It's what we want to accomplish. It's our vision. It's our direction. It includes things like our business goals, our culture goals, our market goals, operation goals, financial goals, etc. From the ends, and none of this is going to be new to you. So this isn't like real major brain stuff. It's just, it starts with the ends, then it goes to the means. And what does the means represent? How are we going to accomplish those goals? Like, what are our priorities? What's our operational plan? What are the roles and expectations of each person who's on our team? Who's making decisions, and how do those decisions get made? And then, very simple, goes right into coordination. So now, once we've got the ends and the means figured out, now we have to figure out what are our habits of getting things done. How do we make sure there's cross-functional support if we've got a bit of a larger organization? How are we collaborating, problem solving, sharing information, who's accountable for what, and everything that needs to get done to support the means to support the ends. And then finally, there's our relationships. And relationships include everything from individual performance, individual skills, communication, personal styles, critical thinking styles, support, and all that kind of thing. Really simple. But here's the catch. And this is the part I love about this. If the ends is not in alignment, by definition, everything below, I did that too fast. Everything below is also not going to be in alignment. If you're not clear on what you want to accomplish, there's no way you can agree on how we're going to accomplish it, or how we're going to coordinate to accomplish it, or even the relationships to get it done. It's impossible. But there's hope, because if the ends is in alignment, but the means is out of alignment, then by definition, if you don't agree on how to accomplish the goals, that means you're also not going to agree on how to execute or the individual relationships. Seeing the pattern here? This is really cool. Now let's go back to the beginning and say the ends is in alignment, the means is in alignment, but now it's the coordination that's not in alignment. Well, by definition, that means the relationships won't be in alignment. Because again, if we're not agreeing on who's doing what and how we're going to coordinate and who's going to get the information when, then that usually turns into conflict, which then turns into trust issues, which then turns into relationship problems. So here's the question of the day. At which level is there always a problem regardless of where it starts? That's right. No matter where you are in this process of breakdown, relationships always show up. And relationships is what gets the attention of everybody. When I'm in conflict with someone, I've got an emotional reaction. I feel terrible about it. If I have a trust issue, it invokes that emotion. You were kind of talking about that, and the polarization. People start to take sides, and it's all about the relationship. But here's the challenge. If you fix the relationship, but the problem stems from any one of these three areas, I guarantee you won't have a solution. It's just going to show up again in a different way. Because the root cause of most breakdowns have nothing to do with relationship, even though that's what's getting all the attention. If you go into organizations, they're always putting on a new communication class, a new class on managing conflict. They're spending millions of dollars to solve relationship breakdowns, and in general, has nothing to do with relationships at all. So what can we do as leaders when we're starting to deal with relationship problems in our workplace? You can do exactly what I do in an organization. The first thing I do is start here. Are we aligned with our ends? Are we clear on the ends? If we are, and most are, by the way, most organizations I go into today are very clear. They have clear vision, they have clear goals, they've done strategic planning. All of that's great. But they may not be aligned on how to accomplish it. Because a lot of times what happens is we create the priorities, we go down to the goals, and then we pass it out to different areas, and now we have competing goals. And that's where problems can begin. If you do have that set up well, great, then I would look at the execution. How are we making sure to have agreements on how we're going to function? Just like a baseball team determines how do we make a double play, and they practice that. It's the same thing here. So the net of this is we can be much smarter about our organizations by not getting caught in relationships and really making sure that at every level we have clear alignment. Now, here's the good news. You all have a copy of my book, Be State. But let me give you the ends is covered in chapters 9 and 10. The means is covered in chapter 11. Coordination is covered in chapters 14 and 15. And relationship building at the personal level is covered in chapter 19. So I've given you kind of the model of it, but if you want to get more information about how do I develop the ends in a way that is clear for people, how do we develop the goals so that there's shared ownership, and it's not just your ownership and them doing the job, but shared ownership. How do we create those collective habits? That's all what's described in the book, and I wanted to make sure that you all had it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here today at the International Executive Council. Isn't it wonderful to be around such accomplished people from around the world? Let me start by a question here. How many of you have upgraded your smartphone operating system in the last 12 months? All right. Thank you. How many of you have upgraded your leadership operating system in the last 12 months? Fantastic. And that is the topic we are going to talk about today. I love to start my talks with a Yogi Berra. How many of you know Yogi Berra, the Baseball Hall of Famer? Fantastic. So baseball is 90% mental and the other half physical. So I believe leadership is 90% mental and the other half is hard work. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Before I go here, how many of you have a favorite definition of success? Wow, unanimous. So my definition of success is you're successful if you like who you are, you like what you do, and you like how you do it. That's my favorite definition of success. And what do I mean by the following three things? You like who you are. You like being who you want to be. You're focused on being as opposed to doing. You like who you are as a human being, as someone with a character, with your values, the way you conduct yourself, and who you are. You like what you do, your behavior. You like the way you behave. Align with your values, align with your character, and align with the way you want to be perceived. You also, your work, your job, what you do is aligned with your aptitudes, it's aligned with what you love to do, is aligned with your passion. Isn't it wonderful to do something that's aligned with who you are? And finally, this becomes a lifetime endeavor mastery to do better along the lines of who you are and who you want to be, and along the lines of behaving the way you want to behave. Create mastery, which is a lifetime endeavor. So a friend of mine who has written books and is phenomenal, Sudhir, created this slide, which I'm borrowing here. And that is showing that from a business leadership perspective, the business outcomes, we always focus on the external stuff, which is the profit, the revenue, the branding, the marketing, the product, the new product introduction, and yes, the new operating system upgrade. And we don't know what's below the surface for leaders who create and generate the results. So business outcomes, we see professional mastery, we see whether it's accounting, whether budget management, whether it's your marketing, your advertisement, but we don't take action, don't take attention in terms of the organizational mastery. How do we organize our leadership? How do we organize our behavior? And how do we value our beliefs, values, and mindset, which goes to personal mastery? How our personal groundedness, personal mastery impact who we are? Because as a leader, we are still a person. You cannot divide the person from the leader. It's the same thing. So how do we build a foundation of behavior and being so that we can create the desired outcomes? That is the part that is not seen with the naked eye. To me, mastery is going the extra mile. And that is where my favorite quote comes. There is no traffic jam on the extra mile, because very few people go the extra mile. People up to 100, they're stuck in traffic jams. They're struggling, but as soon as we exceed that 100%, the 1%, 2%, 10%, the highways open up because few of us are going the extra mile. And that extra mile gives us the mastery of the behavior, mastery of being grounded, having the character, having the courage to do the right thing, and being the person we want to be. When we talk about organizational mastery, we are looking below the surface. Marshall Goldsmith, the famous book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, is not focusing on what to do. It's focusing on 20 bad habits to break. These are the 20 habits that keep us from manifesting the true leader in us. There would be a quiz on this, by the way, guys. So instead of taking you through the whole thing, let me focus on an example, three classic habits of smart and highly educated leaders. Because we're too smart, we want to win too much. Because we're too smart, We want to add too much value. A poor employee has worked all night and has created a document that is truly good enough. It's very good. And then we find, if you just take this sentence and reply, it doesn't make any difference. But we have to add that value because we're too smart. And then destroy the joy, the mojo, the energy, the positive sense of that person who worked all night, and destroy it by trying to just reverse 2 words, which at the end of the day doesn't make any difference in the outcome. Why? Because we're too smart. We have to show that we're a smarter kid in the room. And then passing too much judgment, because nobody can do it as good as we do. We have to judge other people. So these are 3 of the 20 elements that if we stop doing, we'll be a better leader and we can focus. A few others, small behavioral changes that produce huge leadership effectiveness. Not starting a sentence with no. Don't say something positive and then say, but. This is a fantastic room, but if we had the room with facing the south instead of the north, you would have had a better light. You just destroy the positive comment you just made by using that but or however. And this famous thing, no, I agree. Well, why don't we say yes, we agree? Why do we inject negativity into a sentence? Great job, but, just we discussed. And then my most favorite or least favorite, somebody's trying to tell you, I know. Well, don't just listen and appreciate that somebody's sharing with you, including a joke. You can laugh again at the joke. You have more fun again instead of saying, no, I know that joke. Don't bother yourself. Make me feel great. So, and destroy somebody's positive energy who's trying to share something good with you. So coming to personal mastery, that was organizational mastery stuff. Coming to personal mastery, this is one of the best books that you're nodding your head. One of the best book, which is a collection of some of the best HBR, Harvard Business Review articles on self-mastery, managing ourselves, the sense of self. So I just wanted, including a bonus article, how will you measure your life? I love the discussion about how do you measure the performance of a nonprofit. This is how do you measure our lives, which is one of the leaders, Clayton Christensen, who wrote The Innovator Dilemma, the famous masterpiece. So this is another one that Sinan mentioned. We had a 3-hour workshop and some of the members of Executive Council participated in. This is a true system approach to self-management, managing your energy, managing your mojo, managing your vibes, your mindset, your energy in terms of a true system that you can apply. I believe it was Sinan said the same day in the afternoon he applied it and generated very positive results. So systematic approach, we don't have time to go it. The book is Get Clarity by Kathy and Gary Hawk. Both of them were here and presented the workshop for 3 hours. So people have asked me in terms of how can we bring all of it together in terms of a workshop that people can learn and start applying the upgrade to the leadership operating system. I said I'm not smart enough to give you a lot of ideas, but I know what has impacted me personally, and I can bring it together and offer it as a workshop. So the following 5 masteries, I've put it in a workshop that I offer in 3 hours or half a day or 1 full day or a keynote speech around self-mastery, emotional mastery, interpersonal mastery, behavioral mastery, and finally coaching mastery, because as leaders, we mentor and we coach others. And there is a right way to mentor and coach, and there is a way that will not be as effective. So package that into, offered it at Harvard, at Stanford, at UCI, and elsewhere. And when we have time, I would be honored to offer it to the International Executive Council. In conclusion, we cannot scale our business any faster than we can scale ourselves. Thank you.
My name is Lou Penrose. I run a firm called Lou Penrose Government Affairs, creative name. I spent 15 years working for members of Congress in Washington, D.C. and here in California, and worked in the media 10 years prior to that. So, and I'm sure where Scott feels about the disdain for those two universes. But it did bring me to what I'm doing now, and that is helping individuals, industries, and companies with government relations. By a show of hands, how many of you have ever, besides paying your taxes, have ever had to deal with a government agency, a bureaucracy, or the mayor's office, or your state senator? Yeah, so more than just a few, okay? Politics is fun. At the end of the day, the White House isn't going to be where your solutions are if you have problems in your companies or your businesses. The Speaker of the House is not the person to call. Primarily, I would argue the governor is probably not going to be able to help you. Your state senator might. Your mayor certainly will if you run a business in town, like a restaurant, and they just eliminate all your street parking. Or if you're developing an apartment building and they change the rules and say that you can no longer have street parking, or we're tripling the cost of fire inspection. If you're in an industry and the state that you're in, or one of the states that you're working in, changes their rules on regulations that eliminates an entire sector of part of your business because they change the rules of credentialing of providers, that can affect your industry. Those are the kinds of things that I help folks with. So it's not nearly as sexy as the stuff you see on Fox News or MSNBC, but it will affect your bottom line far more significantly. When I worked in the apartment industry for many years after Congress, I used to tell my owners that you can have the best accountants in the world to run your company. You can have the best attorneys to make sure every contract is ironclad, and you can have the best employees. And then on some Tuesday night, a couple of maniacs at City Hall can go and change an ordinance in the city that your company is in, or that a business in your company is in, and it can totally change the whole dynamic of the direction of your company. So I call this having a political voice, having a government voice. It's something that should be on the minds of most people in business, because you can adjust your businesses and your models for taxation. You can adjust for regulation. One way or the other, you're going to have to adjust. You can do that. The unknown out there is what's going to happen government-wise with respect to the direction of government. How is that going to affect my business and the growth of my business? And what should I do? You should have a political voice. You should have some kind of a government voice. So I kind of put together the way I lead and train companies to how to develop that. And I know that the camera wants me to pivot, but I'm going to write anyway. The first thing to do is admit it. Admit that you have a voice. You absolutely have a voice. Sinan talked about what was your latest, social media post. That goes out to tons of people, right? That goes out to hopefully many, many, many people. You have families, you have colleagues. You have a voice. When you're sharing your thoughts about the way things ought to be with respect to your businesses, or the way America treats our veterans, or the way licenses are issued, or anything across the political spectrum and the government spectrum, you have a political voice. You have to figure out how to harness it and use it to your advantage so that you can get those things done. Next thing, very important, decide. Decide what it is you need, what you want. Don't be ethereal. I wish it could be this way. It should be this way. They should just do this. Decide exactly, words matter, exactly what you need and what you want in government. It is the most important thing. Spending 15 years working in Congress, folks would come into my boss's office and they would leave and he would look at me, what exactly did they want? I don't know, they'd never ask for anything. They would just tell you stories, but they didn't decide, right? Government officials and lawmakers are there to fix things if they can, and they want to. But you as an industry, whether you're the automotive industry or the airline industry, whether you're venture capitalists or whether you run a restaurant in Irvine, you need to decide what it is that you want to get accomplished. Number 3, this follows that too. Realize that you're not going to get everything you want. Going in, you're not going to get everything you want. Someone will be suspicious if you got everything you want. You are certainly not going to get everything you want at a government affairs interaction, at a political argument. You're not. You're not going to go to City Hall and get everything you want. Strategically, what do? Vegas is here. You shoot higher. You ask for more. You ask for 150% of what you want. so that you can settle and compromise. So you're not going to get everything you want. Know that going in. Don't stamp your foot down about, I got some, but not everything. So since you know you're not going to get everything you want to make sure that you over-ask. Number 4, seek. You're not alone. You're not the only person with this problem. You're not the only person with this issue. Find partners, find coalitions, find industry allies, find affected parties, right? Get folks together that agree with you. Find people that are also affected by whatever it is that you're working on and bring them together. I mean, the more letterheads, the better if you're trying to solve a problem in government. The more folks that can exercise power, weight, and influence on a mayor, a governor, a state senator, or the President of the United States, the better. The bigger your coalition, the stronger you are. Number 5, my favorite. This is something that should not be lost upon anyone who's in business. Ask. Ask. It is the least utilized, most powerful tool in your toolbox. It is amazing how much power just asking has. Ask for a meeting with a lawmaker, right? Ask for a change in law. Ask for a redefinition of a term of the legislation. Ask. Ask for the signature on the contract, right? In business, ask for her hand in marriage, in love. Ask. It is very effective. Never, ever, ever leave the conversation without an ask in government. Because at the end of the day, they know that's why you're in their room. That's why you're in the office. You have an ask. They're looking for it. They're happy to accommodate, but you have to ask. Number 6, invest in democracy. You know, you don't have to be a millionaire to donate to politics. Invest in democracy, right? Get together a group of friends and for the cost of a couple of pizzas, invite someone to a room or a restaurant and get behind a city council member that is on your side or at least open to your point of view. Get behind a gubernatorial candidate or a presidential candidate. You know, but invest. Put your dollars where it's our country, right? So why shouldn't we want a better democracy? Why shouldn't we want a better republic? Why shouldn't we want lawmakers that are open to people like us who want to affect change and make things better for business or better for whatever the advocacy concern you had? So invest in democracy. It's very easy to do. And number 7 is where the work comes in. Pursue. That's the part that where it all drops off. Once they accomplish 1 through 6, they don't, the work is pursuing. Constant perseverance to get things changed. Sometimes it takes months and years to turn a corner. But if you asked the right question and you decided on what you wanted to get done, 18 months worth of government relations and relationship building is not a long time as long as your decision, your realization, your ask was right, because it could be, monumental. I mean, I've seen work take years, but then the result is something that is, it's the change to either an industry or American democracy, or the bottom line to a business or an industry here in California is historic. So, set your sights and, as I said, continue to pursue. Never, ever, ever let up. And that's where I'll leave it. I think I'm right at 9, and I'm happy to answer any questions.